Karen Bezos liked to tell people she was related to the Jeff Bezos. She wasn't, but that didn't stop her from throwing the name around like it gave her special privileges. She ruled over Redwood Estates as if she owned it, using the HOA like her personal army, slapping fines on anyone who dared step out of line. But her biggest mistake? Messing with the wrong person. Because when she illegally towed my motorcycle, she had no idea she had just declared war on the CEO of Kawasaki. And by the time this was over, she wouldn't just lose her title, she'd lose everything. But let's rewind, because it all started with a single bright orange piece of paper taped to my garage door. Buckle up, because this story will have you raging, laughing, and cheering all at once. If you've ever had to deal with an HOA nightmare, you already know how infuriating these power-hungry tyrants can be. But what happens when they cross the wrong person? Stay with me, because by the time we're done, you'll be throwing virtual confetti in the comments. Smash that like button if you think HOAs have gotten out of control, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because trust me, you're going to want to share this one. The moment I pulled into my driveway, I felt it. A deep, gut-wrenching sense that something wasn't right. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and crimson, casting long shadows over Redwood Estates. But my focus wasn't on the beauty of the evening sky. No, my attention was locked on a single, infuriating detail, a bright orange piece of paper, flapping violently against my garage door like a taunt from the universe itself. My stomach twisted into a knot as I stepped closer. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of cut grass and distant barbecue, but the bile rising in my throat made it impossible to enjoy. My pulse pounded in my ears as I ripped the notice from the door, my fingers trembling from something far beyond the cold. Violation, unauthorized vehicle storage, remove motorcycle within 48 hours or face immediate towing and fines. And right below it, in Karen Bezos's unmistakably smug handwriting, a note that made my vision blur with rage. Motorcycles reduce property values and attract an undesirable element to our community. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. My hands balled into fists at my sides. My Kawasaki, a gleaming custom-built 2025 Road Glide, sat in my driveway, a machine more valuable than Karen's overpriced European SUV. I had poured years of passion, sweat, and dedication into that bike, tweaking every last detail to perfection. It wasn't just a motorcycle. It was a statement, a part of me, and she wanted it gone. I sucked in a slow breath, forcing the fury back into the pit of my stomach. I had dealt with control freaks before. I knew their type. The ones who thrived on dictating other people's lives, using their tiny scraps of authority to mask their own insecurities. But this was beyond petty rules and regulations. This was personal. Then, as if summoned by my rage, she appeared. Karen Bezos strutted past my house in her designer workout outfit, her blonde hair styled to Pinterest perfection. She walked like she owned the world, like Redwood Estates was her personal fiefdom, and I was just some unfortunate peasant daring to exist outside her vision of perfection. She didn't wave, she didn't stop, she didn't need to. She glanced at my Kawasaki, then tapped her $1,200 smartwatch. A silent warning. Time was ticking. A slow, bitter chuckle escaped my lips. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Most people assumed I was just another suburban homeowner, someone who worked a standard 9 to 5 and spent weekends mowing the lawn. They saw my leather jacket, my calloused hands, and assumed I was just another biker, a middle-aged man clinging to his past. They were wrong. I was the CEO of Kawasaki Motorcycles. I had spent decades building machines that roared with power, that symbolized freedom itself. My hands had shaped the very industry Karen was trying to erase from her pristine little neighborhood. My bikes weren't just vehicles, they were legends. And this woman, this insufferable, power-drunk HOA tyrant, thought she could erase me with a single orange slip of paper? A slow, predatory smile crept across my face. She had just started a war she wasn't ready for. I turned back toward my house, my mind already spinning with the first steps of my counterattack. I wasn't just going to fight this. I was going to bury her. I glanced back at my Kawasaki, its chrome gleaming under the fading sunlight. She had 48 hours. That was 47 more than I needed. I walked into my house, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The moment I shut the door behind me, I felt a rush of emotions, rage, disbelief, and a deep, gnawing frustration that I couldn't shake. How dare they? How dare they even threaten to take something that was mine? My Kawasaki wasn't just a bike, it was my freedom, my escape, my sanctuary. And now, Karen Bezos, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had dared to put her hands on it with a warning notice stuck to my garage like a personal challenge. I needed answers. I needed justice. But first, I needed coffee. I poured the coffee into a mug, barely tasting it as I took a sip. My hands still trembled. The anger was too raw, too fresh. I stared out the window, my mind wandering back to the very first day I arrived here. I remembered how peaceful it had felt, the sense of relief washing over me as I parked my bike in the driveway, finally free from the pressures of the corporate world. But that peace had been an illusion, shattered by a woman who thought she was untouchable. Karen Bezos thought she could bully me. That was her first mistake. I grabbed my laptop, planting myself at the dining table. If I was going to fight this, I needed to be prepared. I cracked my knuckles and started searching for the HOA's bylaws. The official website was clunky, outdated, probably designed that way on purpose to discourage homeowners from looking too closely. I scrolled through endless pages of legal jargon, my frustration growing with every passing minute. They had rules about hedge height, rules about mailbox colors, even rules about what kind of curtains you could have facing the street, but nowhere did it say motorcycles were prohibited. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to slow down, to be methodical. If I was going to fight this, I needed irrefutable proof. I opened a new tab, searching for archived versions of the HOA bylaws. If they had changed anything recently, I wanted to know. As I compared different versions from the past 5 years, something strange caught my eye. An amendment had been added just 3 months ago, and it was suspiciously vague. It mentioned nuisance vehicles, but didn't specify motorcycles. My jaw clenched. Karen had left just enough room for interpretation, a loophole she could exploit. But loopholes worked both ways. I wasn't just some frustrated homeowner. I had spent years negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, untangling legal messes that made this HOA's nonsense look like child's play. I knew exactly how to dismantle their argument, and I was going to enjoy it. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. There it was, proof. My heartbeat quickened. If there was no bylaw banning motorcycles, then Karen had just threatened me illegally. But why? I had a sinking feeling in my gut that this wasn't just about some fabricated community standard. This was personal, and I was about to find out just how deep this corruption ran. Fueled by adrenaline, I turned my focus to the towing company that executed Karen's orders. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I searched for records of previous tows in the area. It didn't take long before I noticed a pattern. Every vehicle that had been towed in the past year had been handled by the same company, Bezos Towing. The name sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. Bezos? That wasn't a coincidence. I dug deeper, cross-referencing local business records. And then I found it, the smoking gun. Bezos Towing was owned by Karen's husband. I sat back, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't about property values. This wasn't about community rules. This was about money. A lot of money. Karen Bezos wasn't just some HOA busybody enforcing arbitrary rules. She was running a racket, a well-oiled, profitable scam designed to bleed homeowners dry under the guise of community regulations. I felt a slow, bitter smirk creep onto my face. They thought I was just going to roll over and accept this. They were wrong. I took another sip of coffee, now ice cold, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about principle. Karen had spent years throwing her weight around, intimidating people who didn't have the time or means to fight back. She had built an empire on fear and silence. That empire was about to crumble. I exhaled slowly, a sense of clarity washing over me. If Karen wanted a war, she had just found herself a worthy opponent. At exactly 6 a.m. the next morning, my security cameras blared to life, jolting me awake. The harsh glow of the screen illuminated my room, and my heart pounded as I saw movement in my driveway. Squinting at the feed, my blood ran cold. A tow truck, bold as daylight, was backing in, the words Bezos Towing stamped proudly on its side. I threw off the covers, heart hammering, adrenaline surging through my veins. My Kawasaki! They were taking my Kawasaki! I had less than a second to react, and I launched myself from my bed, barely stopping to grab my keys. I had to stop them. Bounding down the stairs, 3 at a time, I could already hear the grinding metal of the winch outside. My breath came in ragged gasps, a mixture of sleep deprivation and sheer fury fueling me. By the time I threw the front door open, the truck had already lifted my motorcycle off the ground. "Hey, stop!" I roared, sprinting toward them barefoot on the freezing pavement, the sharp morning air burning my lungs. The driver, a burly man with a weathered face and an expression of pure indifference, glanced at me in the side mirror and sneered. "Too late, buddy. Should have moved it when you had the chance." The truck lurched forward, my prized Kawasaki swaying precariously in the grip of the chains. Panic crashed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't let them take it. My bike was more than just a vehicle. It was a piece of me, a symbol of my freedom, my passion, my hard-earned success, and Karen Bezos was ripping it away. Fueled by sheer desperation, I ran after the truck, my feet slapping against the pavement, my fists pounding against the side of the metal beast as it picked up speed. "Let it go! You can't do this!" My voice was raw, but I didn't care. The driver laughed, like this was some sick game. "Back off before you get hurt," he barked, his voice rough, callous, threatening. I didn't back off. I lunged toward the control panel at the side of the truck. But before I could reach it, the passenger door flew open, nearly slamming into me. "I said back off!" the driver bellowed, and suddenly I found myself stumbling, nearly falling flat on the asphalt. My feet barely caught me in time, but the truck didn't stop. The monster kept rolling, dragging my bike, my life, away with it. My throat burned from screaming, my pulse roaring in my ears, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I had never felt so powerless. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to look. I already knew who it was. With shaking hands, I yanked it out and glanced at the screen. Karen Bezos. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat and opened the message. "Your unauthorized vehicle has been legally removed by order of the HOA. A towing fee of $500 has been applied, along with additional penalties for non-compliance. Failure to retrieve your vehicle within 48 hours will result in further fines and potential impoundment. HOA office hours begin at 9 a.m. if you wish to discuss." The rage that filled me at that moment was something primal, something dark. Legally removed? Legally? They had no right. No right. My fingers hovered over the screen, itching to respond, to unleash every furious word boiling inside of me. But I knew better. No. Not yet. I took a deep breath, forcing the fire in my chest into something colder, sharper. Karen thought she had won. She thought she had me cornered. But she had just made the worst mistake of her life. I turned back toward my house, eyes blazing with a new kind of determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. But to me, the world had never looked darker. Karen Bezos had started a war, and I was about to end it. By the time I walked into the HOA office at 9 a.m. sharp, I was already 3 steps ahead. My heart pounded like a war drum, but on the outside, I was cool, composed, a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Karen Bezos sat behind her oversized desk, a smug smile curling at the edges of her lips. She adjusted her pearl necklace, the light catching the cold white beads as if they were mocking me. She was the type of woman who thrived on control, a dictator in designer heels, and today she thought she had already won. "Mr. Friedrich," Karen said, barely looking up from her stack of paperwork, her voice dripping with condescension. "I have your paperwork right here." She slid a folder across the desk with deliberate slowness, like she was presenting the final nail in my coffin. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. Instead, I locked eyes with her. "You towed my motorcycle illegally." Her smirk widened. "Rules are rules." My fists clenched at my sides. My motorcycle wasn't just a machine, it was a part of me, a symbol of freedom, of everything I had worked for. And this woman, this petty, power-drunk tyrant, thought she could take that from me? I finally opened the folder. Inside, a single page had been highlighted. Recreational vehicles are not permitted to be stored in driveways. I exhaled sharply, my pulse a steady thunder in my ears. This is ridiculous. That bike is worth more than your house. Karen tilted her head, feigning amusement. Oh, Mr. Friedrich, we're not here to discuss finances. We're here to discuss compliance, something you clearly struggle with. I leaned forward, placing my palms on her pristine mahogany desk. You put that notice on my garage while I was out of town. You didn't give me a chance to respond. That wasn't enforcement. That was entrapment. She sighed dramatically, as if she were dealing with a child. Perhaps if you paid more attention to your community responsibilities rather than gallivanting around on that thing, you wouldn't be in this situation. She clicked her tongue, waving a dismissive hand. Photography isn't allowed in the office, she snapped as I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures of the so-called rules. Oh, is that written down somewhere too? I asked, my voice cold as steel. Her expression twitched just for a second. A crack in the armor. I wasn't just some homeowner complaining about a missing lawn gnome. I was here for war. You're out of line, Mr. Friedrich, she seethed, her polished nails tapping against the desk in barely contained rage. I smiled. No, Karen, I'm just getting started. Karen, ever the control freak, sat up straighter, adjusting her blouse as if that would restore her dominance. You will pay the impound fees. You will remove that thing from the impound lot, and you will cease this little tantrum before it escalates further. I let the silence hang between us, thick with unspoken threats. Then slowly, deliberately, I closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. Karen, I said, my voice low, dangerous, do you know what happens when people abuse their power? Her lips parted, her bravado flickering like a candle in the wind. Excuse me? They lose, I said simply, every single time. As I walked out, I could hear them whispering behind me. They had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I made one phone call. Just one. But that call would set off a chain reaction that no one, not even Karen Bezos in all her delusional, self-appointed royalty, could stop. By noon, a news van pulled up in front of the HOA office. I watched from a distance as reporters adjusted their microphones, their cameras locked on the pristine glass doors of the HOA headquarters. They had no idea what they were about to uncover, no clue just how deep this corruption ran. But I did. And I was ready to expose every last detail. By 3 p.m., the first scandalous report aired. Karen's name was plastered across the screen, right next to words like fraud and embezzlement. It wasn't just about my motorcycle anymore. This was about every single homeowner she had bullied, every family she had shaken down for fees that didn't exist. The phones at the HOA office started ringing off the hook. Homeowners wanted answers. They wanted blood. By 5 p.m., the police arrived. Not just one squad car, but an entire fleet. Officers walked in with that slow, deliberate confidence of people who knew they were about to ruin someone's entire day. And Karen? She stood behind her desk, arms crossed, lips pursed in that trademark smirk, until she saw the warrants, until she realized this wasn't just another slap on the wrist. Her face drained of color. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, trying desperately to call her lawyer. But it was too late. Way too late. The charges? Oh, they were glorious. Felony fraud, illegal towing, racketeering. Turns out, Karen and her husband had been running a full-blown criminal operation under the guise of community enforcement. Homeowners had been charged thousands of dollars in fake fines. Vehicles had been stolen under fraudulent infractions and resold through shell companies. And the best part, I had receipts, literal, undeniable, signed receipts linking every shady transaction back to Karen Bezos and her power-hungry HOA empire. Karen tried to run. The second she saw the officer stepping closer, she bolted for the side door like a cornered rat. But justice was faster. A firm hand clamped down on her arm, stopping her dead in her tracks. She turned, eyes wild, mouth opening in protest, but no words came. She knew there was nothing left to say. She tried to weasel her way out. She batted her fake eyelashes, put on that pitiful, pleading voice, and said it was all a misunderstanding, that the paperwork had been misfiled, that she had no idea this was happening. The officers didn't even blink. She even had the audacity to claim she was related to Jeff Bezos, as if that somehow made her untouchable, as if she could buy her way out of this mess with a fake last name and a well-rehearsed sob story. But it was too late. The cameras were rolling. The neighbors were watching. And in that moment, everyone saw Karen Bezos for what she truly was: a fraud, a liar, a greedy tyrant who had finally met her reckoning. Karen's towing company? Shut down. The city revoked their business license, their assets frozen pending further investigation. No more stolen cars, no more backdoor deals. Just an empty lot where their predatory empire once stood. And my motorcycle? Back in my driveway. Not just returned, but freshly detailed, as if to erase every trace of Karen's greed from its chrome surface. I ran my fingers over the smooth leather seat, inhaled that familiar scent of polished steel and freedom. But Karen wasn't going home. She was going to prison. The courtroom was packed the day of her sentencing. Homeowners filled the seats, eager to see justice served. The judge didn't hold back. He listed her crimes one by one, each word like a nail in the coffin of her former life. And when he delivered the final verdict, years behind bars, restitution payments in the hundreds of thousands, Karen collapsed into her chair, her perfect facade finally shattering. There were no designer blazers in prison, no pearl necklaces, no fancy SUVs to parade around in, just cold, hard reality. As they led her away, she turned one last time, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no smirk now, no arrogance, just quiet, seething defeat. I gave her a small wave. Goodbye, Karen. Sometimes justice doesn't come fast. Sometimes it takes patience, strategy, and a little bit of righteous fury. But when it finally arrives, oh, it's glorious. Justice was served. But what about you? Have you ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA Karen? Drop your story in the comments. And if you love seeing entitled people get what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. Because this is what happens when you mess with the wrong person.